I mean, a lot of the great scientists, physicists of earlier days did draw a very clear association between the mathematical underpinnings that they were struggling to understand and the
Hmm.
mind of God, because it feels like God must have been a fantastically
Hmm.
astute mathematician to have been able to sort of set up the world to function according to these mathematical laws. And if at some point you want to speak about it today, I'd be happy to. I have a somewhat different view of mathematics today than even I did
Hmm.
30 years ago. I certainly held to a similar perspective as some of the greats of years ago articulated, much like you were making reference to. But I now see mathematics more as the invention
Hmm.
of the human mind as opposed to the discovery of the fundamental
Okay.
language of reality.
Yeah. So yeah, why don't we explore that a little bit now? Because I think we've already before, like you used the metaphor of mathematics as a language. So you were introduced by your father to a way of, I don't know, interacting with the world, seeing these algorithms, noticing that can be, enjoyable as a game, but then also can be applied to investigating the world. So the language is metaphor. We've mentioned. Maybe tell me a little bit more. Um, can we just? Is it helpful to describe mathematics as one human language among many, or where does that metaphor work and where does it fall short?
Yeah, so it's interesting that you refer to thinking of math as a language as a metaphorical way of using the terminology. I would press
Hmm.
even further. I would say mathematics itself emerges from the human capacity to function with
Hmm.
metaphors. When you look at the history of ordinary spoken language, as of course many linguists have done over the centuries, it is astounding, if you've never seen it before, how widespread the use of metaphor is in our language. You take some of the driest sentences that may be used to articulate some statute in some arcane part of the legal system, the driest kind of language that you would imagine, not the language of poets. And even in sentences of that sort, when you go word by word and you trace the origin of those words, you find that almost all of them are
Hmm.
metaphorical. They began as words that had a very concrete association to things in the physical world. And over time, that meaning shifted to a far looser, more poetic
Hmm.
version of whatever idea that word was ultimately able to conjure up in the minds of
Hmm.
listeners or readers. And I see mathematics as an extension of that natural growth of
Hmm.
metaphorical thinking that our species went through. Metaphor is symbolism. And what mathematics is, it takes that to the next level where you articulate using symbols, things about the external world. But it's our minds, in my view, that are conjuring up these useful symbolic representations of things that we
Hmm.
experience. And so, what is math? We encounter the external world. We have this capacity to find patterns, which is how we survived. We encapsulate those patterns by inventing ideas like the circle or the triangle or the number pi or a radius or diameter or the exponential function or the square root function, because these symbolic representations we find have utility in organizing our perceptions
Hmm.
about the external world. So, to me, when we talk about Einstein's equations or Maxwell's equations, these are equations that human beings came up with using symbols and mathematical structures that other human beings
Hmm.
came up with, right? Einstein made use of the ideas of Riemannian geometry, right?
Hmm.
Riemann. And it was other scientists and mathematicians like Gauss and Lobachevsky and other thinkers of an earlier age who, again, in this metaphorical, symbolic way, found the structures necessary to describe curved surfaces. Einstein then builds upon that with his own metaphorical symbolic thinking to describe the curvature
Hmm.
of space
Yeah.
time in this mathematical language. And so to me, it's a beautiful story in which human beings, in order to survive, articulate patterns in the physical world. Then, once they survive, they have the luxury to articulate patterns about things that we don't
Hmm.
directly experience
Yeah.
in the physical world. And that's where you get the equations of physics.